Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us live. We are excited.
Yes. Come on in the room. I steal
Come
that one from
on.
Tabitha Brown. Come on in the room. Hi, Matt.
Why the long use?
Wow. Wow.
Well, you like on this.
Jay.
Está bien.
May the
Um,
Lord bless you and keep you. Is our prayer.
all right, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We'll be sure
Yes.
to, I don't know, to keep it light.
Um, Appreciate you joining us, y'all. I'm Kristian Roberts, Director of Education for the Dallas Opera. I'm here with
Quo Johnson, Education and Company Culture Manager for the Dallas Opera.
and of course, we're here with another episode of Taking the Stage with Kristian
And Quo.
So let's talk about today's topics. First of all, we want to do our want to give a shout out and a thank you for everybody that is joining us. And of course, we always want to give a shout out to our boy David Lomeli.
Hey, David.
I had to make sure you got it in.
And
I
then
see a lot of you joining.
yes, we want to make sure, as always, that just something that we've started doing, something that we will continue to do, is a land and people acknowledgement. So we want to take this time right here, right now in this space as we are together to acknowledge that here in Dallas, we are on stolen land. We are on the land of the cattle of the Wichita and of the Comanche sovereign nations that were forced from their home and forced into horrible conditions that face genocide so that others can come in and settle the land. As we always say, Dallas is not alone in this. We had many settlers in this area who assumed that the land was either vacant or forced others off the land so that they could claim it as vacant. So I want to be mindful of what that means. And the fact that we have people who were stolen from their homes and brought here against their will to build what we now enjoy as our nation. So I do this not to create the guilt game, right? Or the blame game, but just to acknowledge history, to acknowledge where we are, to acknowledge that we did not create any of these conditions. None of us here right now. We've inherited them, which means that we've also inherited the opportunity, the ability, the agency to correct the harm, to connect with one another, and then to begin to do the work necessary for us to move forward together. So I thank you for joining me for this land and people acknowledgement.
Thank you, Cole. I think it's very important that we always acknowledge the whole of our history and not what has just been told to us. We always talk about all the time about questioning the narrative. Because what you have been taught is not always what was. Let's
Well,
just
yeah,
leave
what
it at
all of
that.
us have been taught in a way, right?
Yeah.
So
No,
it's part
and
of
it's
the
from
system.
everybody's different perspectives. You know, it's just that some people's perspective got a little more attention than others. So we just leave it at that. But today we want to talk about, you know, there's a we've been saying this a lot, but there is really a lot going on in our nation, in our world. Things literally change overnight, hour to hour. And in our case, you know, we titled this episode "Gathering Around the Table," because we have always wanted to be here and to be able to answer questions that you all may have. Talk about some of the questions that we get sometimes, or talk about some of just the fatigue that we're starting to see in some of the controversy that just seems to be everywhere around the work of equity and around allyship and this sort of thing. So we wanted to take the time to address some of that today. Did I cover it, Quo? Did I cover it?
Yeah, and not even just address, right? Because people will do what we feel is necessary for ourselves to protect ourselves, but in more so than just address, but just to gather around the table so that we can find ways to support ourselves, to support one another, and then so that we can find ways to support the work that we're wanting to do, regardless of what that work is, right? What it looks like, can't tell you what to do, everybody's grown. But what it looks like for us to have healthy conversations, because that is a skill that is necessary going forward. It's a skill that has been necessary for forever, but especially going forward. And then how we kind of block out the noise.
Yes.
How we block out the noise so that we can focus on what is. right here, right now. So
Yes. And also just, you're not alone. I know being in the virtual world, in the virtual space, it can feel like that, and it can feel silos and like you're working on your own. But Quo always says we can work on this together. You don't have to do it alone. So let's just jump in. Let's just jump right in. So Quo, we talked this week. We've had a couple of conversations regarding this live, about the direction we wanted to take, and just the fact that things are literally happening overnight.
yes,
Different things are happening overnight. There's a lot of fear and tension, and that can help. We can lose our focus when we get caught up in it, and forget that there's a bigger thing that we're all trying to work towards, right?
right.
And a bigger purpose and a bigger goal, and that really is striving for a more equitable and just world, and that is in the arts, that is in education, that is in society. So let's dive right into it. I don't want to ask you questions like I'm interviewing you, but
Oh
I
yeah.
feel like I don't want to be like, so Quo, because I'll put on that Oprah of the opera thing, and then I'll start to do it. But I do want to talk about what it means to gather at the table, because we hear a lot of people say, invite people to the table, gather around the table, make room at the table, all these references to this table. What is it?
Ooh, what is the table? I like that. What is the table? I believe the table is um, the metaphor, if you will, for existence, for decision making, the metaphor for power in a way. So,
Yeah,
and the
and inclusion.
metaphor for the things and the tools that we use so that we can do the work that needs to be done, so that we can create opera, so that we can create art, so that we can extend into education. So that table is where all of those things take place. All those tools are gathered together so that we can have access, so that we can do our work. And so when we say people need to have a seat at the table, invite people to the table, those things, all of those things, it's a matter of making sure people have the autonomy or have the agency, making sure people have the power making decisions, the ability to include their experiences in the work that is being done. So that's the table. But also, when we say gather around the table, it's also kind of a cultural reference, if you will, and then we got to gather together.
Mm-hmm.
You got to gather, you got to get together. That table can be a meal. That table
Mm-hmm.
can be a come to Jesus meeting. That table can be a lot of different things. So it's just a matter of how we define table, what tools we see at the table, but more than anything, the gathering portion is the conversation that needs to be had, the support that needs to be had, the understandings that need to be shared, and the shared visions that need to be created. And you do that by gathering, and then you do that by gathering around the table. So that's why we got to come together, got to gather around the table.
Absolutely. It's you know what it that reference to food. It always goes back to the gathering around the table with family. For me, I always think about Sunday dinners, even though those we can't do that like we used to right now. But it ultimately is a place where people can gather around and partake.
Yeah.
And participate.
Yes.
I ask that because in the arts right now, even in a virtual world, in a virtual space, digital world, there's a lot of conversation about that. There's a lot of conversation about why it's necessary for people to come and talk to each other, particularly in the realm of equity, diversity, and inclusion, and why conversation is a lot of the work. So can we talk about that a little bit? Because I know a lot of people say action, 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 but can we talk about that a little bit? And I want to ask you, because of your EDI work specifically, because I think people need to understand that part of the action is conversating, and why is that?
So yes, we have a tendency, just as human beings, to define progress based on our own experiences.
Mm-hmm.
So in our experience, if seeing action determines that something is happening. Even if that action is not productive, we still value action as a form of progress. With much of the work that we're needing to do in creating equity, it is addressing things that have been siloed, addressing things that have been allowed to continue because we do not have conversations. We do not have interactions with one another. We do not have engagements with the other, whatever that means and whatever identity. Do not have actual engagements or interactions in a way that informs us outside of our own biases or outside of our own expectations, right? We're looking for something to confirm what we already thought about this person we actually know nothing about. And so because we have been allowed to be separated in so many ways, we don't have conversations. Right? We don't have conversations and we don't have interactions that allow us to challenge what we're already expecting, which is why conversation is such an important piece in this work. Conversation is the first part of action. Yes, it needs to go beyond conversation, but you cannot get beyond conversation if you don't have fruitful conversations. And I believe Chip McNeil, shout out to Chip, hey Chip, put it so beautifully during the Black Opera Alliance panel or the Equity Roundtable, and that you have to have steps before you get to what we perceive as action. Conversation is action, but you have to have a shared vocabulary. Then you have to have conversations. Then you have to determine what matters. Then you have to determine how you're going to measure what you're doing. And then you have to determine or then start to evaluate whether or not it's working and then adjust. So there's levels to this. And so the conversation piece gets so boring for a lot because we want action. We want to move. I want to see some change. I want to see some change right now. But if we're not willing to build the foundation to have conversations and have uncomfortable conversations, once we see those actions go awry, right? Once we see those actions do something we didn't expect, we don't have the tools to have a conversation so that we can adjust properly. So then it becomes, well, this is too difficult. Well, I knew it wasn't going to work in the first place. Or I thought you said that this was the answer. It becomes those things. It also inadvertently becomes a situation where you're just wanting somebody to tell you what to do.
Whew.
Tell me what to do, right? Tell me what to do so that I can do it, which is understandable. We all kind of follow that just point me in a direction, I'll go approach. But it's also very important that this is internal. This has to live within us. This has to be the ability for you to make your own decisions. Even in music, right? So we'll take music. You learn theory, you continue to talk about theory. You stay on theory, you look at it because that becomes the foundation and the basis for you to be able to approach music. And then to be able to not just approach music, I'm going to shout out to my professors at PV, but for you to be able to profess it, right?
Yes.
You become a professional once you understand how it works. But in being able to profess it, you also are able to communicate that to someone else because you have shared language. So if you don't have shared language, right? So if we don't go with theory, if we don't understand the structure of the chord, if we don't understand those things, once we start to move into the music, to move into making our own rules or breaking the rules, right? They were applied afterwards. If we don't have that shared language, if we don't have that shared foundation, if we don't understand the structures, if we don't have the ability to have a conversation about it, once we get into the action, it just falls apart because we did not create the foundation necessary. Now, that is not an excuse to say, keep having the same conversation over and over and then say that we're doing something. Nah, that's not the same thing, right? In dialogue and conversation, you should be able to progress based on prior conversations. And then that's where that growth comes. And that's how it informs our actions. So as we gather around the table to actually talk about it, be patient, but be vigilant. Be patient, but also be mindful of all of the different ways that we have to come together to do this work and the different things that are required of us in order to do this work. Progress looks different and it's not going to be what everybody expects it to be. And then to demand change without looking at the true concepts of why change is necessary is entitlement.
Yes.
Because I've been demanding change for a long time. You've been demanding change. My mama was demanding change. Like, people have been demanding change. It's not enough just to demand it. And then it's not enough to pigeonhole.
We can go back to the late, great James Baldwin when he talks about progress. And he said, "You taking what did he say? You taking my mother's time, my uncle's time, my cousin's time. And you've taken so much time. How much time do you need for your progress?" And I say that because there are a lot of us who have been waiting for a long time.
Right.
And now that there are structures in place and there are tools in place that you can use to truly enact the type of change that is needed and necessary at the structural level, dismantle and replace, dismantle and replace. There are tools available. You're like, let's move, move, move. And I'm like, you don't have the foundation
But we got to
to
do
move
all
the way you need to move. You have to do so. And I love you comparing it to music theory, because we would never in our lifetime approach any score without having that knowledge in our background.
Yep.
I cannot imagine going to and trying to analyze Stravinsky and not having the courses that I needed before then, the foundation that I needed before then. We talked about Stravinsky in a conversation earlier this week, so it's all fine. But we would never do that without having the foundation. Okay, so, and it's the same way with any other subject, and it's going to be the same way when you're doing work in social equity and gender equity and race equity. When you're looking at those things, you have to have the groundwork. Okay, so it is essentially, while not a new field of study for some of us, it is for a lot of folks who have never had to look at things this way before. So I appreciate you doing that, and I'm hoping that people out there that have been through the rigors of music theory and composition will definitely understand that and hear that. Let's talk about the importance of allyship, and I almost had to hesitate to use that word, because what I'm seeing right now, me personally, and I won't go on too far of a tangent, but it seems like the allyship comes with conditions regarding people's humanity. And this is not just an opera problem. Let me be very clear. We are not exempt from the issues. This is a societal problem, okay? But I say that because we've had people express that they're tired, they're not sure what steps to take next. You know, they've begun having conversations in their organizations, in their homes, in their churches, whatever. They've started having these conversations and addressing it, but they're not sure what to do next. Mm-hmm. And case in point, when the grand jury decision came down about Breonna Taylor, there was more rumbling in the world. The arts world, like, what on earth, how is this happening again? And regardless of where you stand or where you sit on this subject, there was still a rumbling. People questioned, how can this happen again? And so I'm wondering what because we know what the answer is. It's systemic.
Yeah.
Like, been saying it's systemic. But how do we now move forward knowing that? How do we continue to focus on this work and continue to move despite these things, despite the how can this be still happening, despite us every month seemingly how can this be situation comes up? What's the key to staying focused and grounded as we move?
I would say, because we're dealing with systems, right? This is not just individual person to person that is a part of the system, but we are dealing with systems. We are dealing with structures. We are dealing with policy, things that remain in place even if an individual disagrees. We are dealing with kind of cultural norms that determine how we're supposed to respond. I would say, one, stop being shocked, because that wastes time. We want to be surprised. We're not. You're not surprised. I'm not surprised. And so as we get beyond the shock factor, I think it's a matter of looking at why we are shocked. Because we're shocked because what we expected the outcome to be is not the outcome. In fact, it's so much against the outcome we expected that we're kind of in this state of what? How do we respond? So in that, it is a matter of anticipating issues, anticipating things that do not fall directly in line with your expectations. Just kind of any way we do any resiliency for organizations, anticipate and be ready, and then organize so that we spend less time being shocked. That does not mean don't mourn. That does not mean do not be upset. That does not mean do not have an emotional response. Yes, all those things, because different people had to take time for different reasons, right? Because it
Yeah.
affected a lot of people, but it continues to affect a lot of people. So the question is, what are you going to do about it? What
Yes.
conversations will you start to have? And then what ways will you start to replace the structure? What ways will you start to replace the system? In this, people are wanting to know what that next step is. And I think it's a matter of explaining equity in a way that tells people, yes, this is extra work. Yes, you have to do your job and then still make difficult decisions about equity and then still make sure that you deliver, because welcome.
Mhm.
So yes, you have to do your job, but then you have to do extra. This is what equity is. It is an extra work. It's not just going to fall into place because we say so or because we want it to happen. Again, we're not just against people. This is systems. This is structure.
Yes.
So equity, yes, equity takes extra work. Yes, equity is going to be hard. Yes, equity is going to take more energy and time than you thought it would. Yes, equity is going to look like you being the only person in the room saying, no, we should probably do it this way. Or what about this? And then, yes, equity looks like you being joined by others who are saying, that's right. We should do this. But it's going to take extra. And it's going to take difficult decisions. It is going to take going to different individuals, different entities, going to all of the extending our unions, everybody, and saying, hey, this isn't right. What do we
Mhm.
do about it? How do we fix it? This is
Yes.
going to all of our recruiting firms and saying, hey, this isn't right. What do we do about it? This is going to board and saying, hey,
Mhm.
I know that you care about this organization. I care about this organization. We all care about this art form. It's not working. What we've
Yes.
been doing is not working. How do we fix it? It takes those difficult conversations. It takes those difficult and kind of sometimes heart-wrenching experiences for us to be able to say, yeah, we want more. We deserve more. We can do more. And so that next step, still conversations. But then after the conversations, it's like have the difficult conversations and then start committing to putting the work into action. Start committing to make sure that you're reaching out to others. Start committing to either yielding space or taking up more space in certain areas, right?
Yeah.
And just being honest about that. Start committing to learning more. Start committing to doing more.
Yeah. I look at this and I often say, when we talk about equity, particularly with my background and my role, in education, I say, if the one of the most inequitable places you will ever find is in the school system. And I bring that up right now because this is where your world and my world starts to intertwine, right? We both are artists. We're very passionate about our art and our work. We're very passionate about education. Very passionate about fairness.
Yeah.
And I get a lot of questions, and for those of you who are parents out there, you might want to tune your ear to this. People say, how do I talk to my children about this? How do I talk to my children about everything that's going on? And I bring that up because there have been questions about curriculum in classrooms,
Mm-hmm.
types of training, at the federal level. I'll leave it at that, okay? Because we're not going to go there. You all have Google and can read and can find this out for yourself. I won't go there, but I want to make it to people to understand that this is something that kids are watching. Someone even in a colleague of mine, a counterpart of mine from another opera company said that her son, was watching everything around him, watching the debates, staying up on current news, all of this thing. And I have nephews who are young, who one is 11, and he's starting to ask these questions, and I'm starting to have to say, okay, here's, and I won't put him out there. His mom is on right now. Hey, sis. But I want people to try to understand, how do we start talking to our kids about this? How do we start addressing this with our children? And I know you've done a number of workshops with well, you have a lot of background in doing workshops with kids, but you have done things specifically for people who are talking to students and incorporating this into their teaching artist work, into workshops for students that they're teaching. And you've also done some with teenagers. I've done some with teenagers as well. But how do we talk to our kids about this? And by kids, I mean, elementary through high school. How do we talk to them about this?
Well, I will say I am not a child psychologist, or
I know. I
that's
know.
my specialty. Um, and so in the work that we do in equity and in the work that I do in community, it is a matter of communicating truth in a way that acknowledges, again, all of our humanity. I
Yes.
believe that so much of what is going on, even with colleagues in other genres, other classical arts genres, and their responses to some of the things that are happening, is a manner of people feeling like they are not being heard, people feeling like they are not being acknowledged. That's not to dismiss those who are actively trying to divide,
Mhm.
those who are actively trying to disrupt and cover up and dismiss. But I believe so much of it is people feeling like, but what about me? Not
Yes.
realizing that things have been about you for a very long time. But in individual experiences compared to everyone else, the system, right? Again, we're against the system that dismisses everyone in
Yes.
different ways. And so I believe that so much of this, as we're talking about how this type of work can be divisive, as we speak about how this type of work goes against our core beliefs as a nation, those things like that, we have to, one, acknowledge that we all got here
Mhm.
different ways. We have to acknowledge the different ways that we got to where we are. And then we have to extend that awareness to others, to the experiences of others, to experiences of groups, to experiences of individuals as well. It's this very complex and honestly beautiful kind of organism that continues to shift and continues to move. So as we're talking with students, the way that I approach it, and as we're talking with kids, younger students, older students, is a matter of what is right. When we are younger, we are taught to be fair. In most cases, we are taught
Yeah.
to
Oh,
share. In most cases, some not. I've seen some. No, not every, but in most
I've
cases,
seen some things. I've seen
where it's
too.
like, hey, you can't do that. You can't just take
Yeah.
his and hers, and you can't do that.
Yeah.
And they're like, but I want it, and I'm like, but you don't
You
need it.
have three, and now they have none. But
You
I
don't
want
need it,
three.
but I want it.
No.
No.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
when we're younger, we are taught to, in most cases, we are taught to share. We are taught to be good citizens in the community. We are taught to help others. We are taught to clean up after ourselves. We are taught to make sure that we are doing our part. As we get older, that gets explained away through biases, through discrimination, through perceptions of others based on our experiences, which are still limited. Even
Yeah.
as adults, experiences still limited. So I believe that in both talking to students and in talking with our kids about it, it's a matter of, well, this is what is fair. This is what actually happened. Do the history, do the work to learn the history. This is what happened. Some people say that they're uncomfortable with land acknowledgements, but this is what happened. And
Yes.
it's still taking place now in different ways. It just shows up in different ways now. The effects are still here right now. We cannot continue to talk about the effects of the founding of this nation and all the glory in that, knowing that it still plays a role now, without paying attention to the other things that took place that still play a role now. Right? So
Yes.
if the Constitution and everything and all of that founding can still play such a role now, then why wouldn't all of the other policies and everything that were put in place that still affect everyone else now? So I believe it's a matter of learning with our students, learning with our kids, teaching our kids, and then centering that humanity. This is what
Mhm.
is fair. If something is not fair, then how do we help?
Yes.
How do we work together to get this done? How are we accountable? How do we be responsible for the things we have, right? And then how do we acknowledge that not everybody has the same things? How do we acknowledge that as we grow older and as we come into our own identities and what that means? How do we acknowledge when a space says that you can't come here and you can't be here because of that? Or how do
Yes.
we acknowledge the lingering effects of spaces that were built just for that?
Yes.
Pop opera. So,
Mm.
how do we acknowledge the lingering effects of people feeling for generations that they could not play a role? And that's everybody. It's not just a matter of racial and ethnicity or ethnic identities. It's a matter of, well, that wasn't for me. Or my
Yes.
parents said it wasn't for me. Because believe it or not, so much of what is shaped extends from generations prior because of their experiences being shared with ours. So,
Yes.
I believe as we talk to students, as we talk to adults, as we talk, it's a matter of have honest conversations,
Mhm.
Be honest about where we are in our journeys, share our own experiences because they're worth sharing,
Mhm.
and then listen to the experiences of others because they're worth being heard.
Yes. No, I'm with you on that. Even in our approach, when we talk about our approach to arts education and to opera education, our approach with adults is really no different than we take the approach we take with children. We really don't. I mean, and so I think that's why I wanted to make sure I asked the question, because I knew the answer was going to be centering truth and honesty.
Mm-hmm.
Period.
My girl.
That goes on. Um, so I think that's the most important thing. I also want to let's talk nuances, because there are nuances. You know, there are nuances to every situation, and even right now amongst um, BIPOC folks, you know, we're having conversations amongst ourselves right now, looking at those nuances. And something that you said earlier is that we all got here
Yeah, we all got here somehow.
some sort of way. Everybody has a story or some sort of way to get here. So why is it so important for um, and again, I'm starting to shy away from the word ally these days because it's starting not to mean much. But for the sake of context, BIPOC and allies coming together.
I would say not even just BIPOC and allies, but everyone, right? So ally is mostly defined as someone who does not share any direct experiences of a particular group, but wants to participate, actively engage in ensuring that that group receives whatever resources they need. Right, that's my kind of paraphrase of it. So it can be for anyone in any situation. If that is not your direct experience, but you're like, no, we got to do something about this, then you count as that. You're in that ally role. You're within that role of how do I support? How do I participate? How do I make this thing go away? How do I help remove these barriers? Or how do I play a role in removing the barriers? As we said, we all got here. We did not get here the same ways. And because we did not get here the same way, we do not all have the same experiences. And because we do not all have the same experiences, we do not face the same barriers, the exact same barriers. There are quite a few barriers that we all share in different groups, especially as we look into intersectionality, as we look into how your identity creates additional barriers because you identify as this plus this, or people have issues with you being a woman and a woman of color and these other things. As we look at that, as we look at the barriers there, we also have to look at the fact that equity requires different tools for each of those. Some of those tools can be shared, absolutely. But it's also a matter of looking at the lie of scarcity, as if there is not enough room to gather around the table.
I am so glad you went there.
And it's not true. So we want to be mindful of the idea of scarcity, of fighting for crumbs. I remember I would say so often, like they want us to be grateful for crumbs when we deserve the feast.
Yes.
So as
A lot of times we cooked it.
When we prepared the feast, and then what it looks like to prepare a feast together with everyone. Yeah. And so I believe that as we look at allies, as we look at what it means once you have a platform, one, to fight for a platform, yes, where your voice can be heard. And then once you have it, what it means to extend that platform to everyone. I remember in one of our episodes, with everyone. I remember one of our episodes, Jerry Hawkins was saying that here in Dallas, we have the American Indian Heritage Organization. So it's American Indian Heritage Day in Texas, which they were our episode last week. They're, I guess, for last week's episode. And Jerry Hawkins was saying that they had never gotten in front of decision makers, city council, state decision makers. But Jerry had the floor. And so he yielded it, right? He yielded the floor so that someone else can take that space to say and do what they needed to do to get the work done. And that's what's important. It is important that we understand, again, that this idea of scarcity is that there's not enough to go around, and there is, because we continue to make it. It's just a matter of where those resources are going and why, and how we work together, understanding that different groups need different things.
Yes.
Different groups need different things. Equity is the extra work it takes to make sure that everybody gets those things, in addition to doing what we're already doing.
Yeah.
It's the hustle, if you will.
Yes.
It's the grit. We talked about it with David. Hey, David.
Yes.
It's the grit. It's the hustle. It's
Yeah.
the extra work. It's the extra effort that it takes. So as we're looking at different groups, and allyship, as we're looking at different ways to identify and those who share in that pain, who feel that pain without the exact experiences, what is the goal?
Yes.
What are you truly wanting to achieve? Right? For me, it's always togetherness in a way that allows people to show up as their best without dismissing or erasing anyone. For me, it's connection. And so as we fight, right, we lift as we climb in different ways. And then we build as we do so. So people don't have to climb the same path the same way, because that's what's been happening. That's what has been passed to us. So as we look at allies, as we look at the different ways that this system has created so many barriers for so many individuals, so many groups for no reason, we have to be honest about what it takes to actually get this work done. Sometimes it takes certain groups receiving resources first and then extending that. So again, so we can bust this wide open, so that we can stop fighting over the same resources or feeling threatened. And then it also takes us actually committing to extending that to one another. But then it also takes people moving together, actually doing the work and not waiting until the work is done and then saying, well, everybody.
Let's go bear the fruit of, let's go get the fruits of somebody else's labor. No, it's about standing with each other and working with each other. I will say this, just in watching this the past 6 months that we've been, that the Opera House, doors have been closed, if you will, but us opening them digitally, all of us opening them digitally somehow, some way. It has been refreshing to see the kind of stands that people are starting to take and questions that people are starting to ask. But I would ask that people not remain stagnant. I would ask that people not let the actions of people who happen to be in the spotlight, and I'll leave it at that, discourage you from continuing to do the work that that needs to be done. I say that because that in the highest levels of our offices in our country, I know a lot of people felt let down, and have been let down, and so I say that that in that way, I think people working together, us coming together and working together and looking at each other rather than what can be a circus, that it keeps us focused on what we need to do. And that's what I love when Quo always talks about, remember that we can do this together. And I think that's the key to focusing. I also think that you talking about honesty and truth, in doing that, and understanding that that's where it starts, understanding that conversation is a key to it. What I want to also move to, though, and Quo, I don't know if you have any more to say on that. I know we need to get to ask, the Q&A, part if folks would like to ask questions.
Oh yeah, if you do want to ask questions, just go ahead and put them in.
Yeah, please.
We'll answer them as we get them.
Yeah, I haven't seen any yet. There's a lot of people have joined and all that, but I haven't seen any.
Hi, hello to everyone.
Yeah, so please feel free to ask any questions that you have on any of these subjects. We're here to answer them. And we need to do it while we have Quo here. She's like the busiest woman on the planet. But I go into that, and I brought up the students and the kids and all that stuff too, because like I said, they're watching every move, and kids are watching and they're listening and they're reading. And so many of our educators and our teachers right now are in positions of where they're having to teach virtually and to a live classroom all at the same time. And so when we talk about equity and access and all this stuff, I need people to understand how it ties into every facet of our lives. And so I want to make sure that when we talk about gathering at the table, that we understand that there has been an ownership of the table. systematically that has been put in place, depending on what table that you're talking about. So when you understand that there's context of when you're inviting people to the table and you're telling them, hey, come sit with us and talk with us and work this out. Remember that their voice needs to have equal weight when they come to that room. Understand that diverse perspectives, not just having a bunch of different color in the room, but I'm talking about diverse experiences,
right? Thinking,
diverse
experience,
backgrounds. Yes, in education and whatever. That does more in that room than just a blanket, superficial, performative stuff. People really have to feel like they are at the table and are heard, and that their ideas are just as valid as anybody else's at the table. Their experience are just as valid as anybody else's at the table, and not that they're just there to take up a space. Oh, we got them in the room. Pokemon.
Yeah.
We caught
the checkbox approach, trying to catch them all. Yeah.
So I think that's important when we're talking about this. I don't see any questions yet, so we might be able to.
And then I would say, even as we try to decide and as we try to approach, I think about working with people like Ian. I think about working with David. I think about working with Maestro. Everybody, all the staff. Everybody, the staff is awesome at the Dallas Opera, just so everybody knows.
They are.
Just in case y'all didn't know, not being biased or anything, but they're all great. And then working with staff in Devo and the creativity that is there, the creativity that can be pulled out, and then what it means to center opera, but not just opera, just in the this is what opera is supposed to be, this is how we're supposed to do it, but what it means to center that storytelling and those experiences, what it means to be creative enough to break free of the things we've been told are supposed to happen that don't actually provide support or healthy structure. Breaking free of saying, well, why would we do that? Okay, well, how about we work on not doing that anymore? Or what it means to center what is important. And I think that we should do the same as we're looking at everything that has been happening, right? Yeah. I think we should do the same as we're looking at how we work in education. As we're looking at how we're working in community, how we're working in social structures. Center what is important, what matters, what is the mission. Does anything that we're doing, does it contribute to this? No? Why is it there? How do we change it so that we can? We can't change it, get rid of it. If we get rid of it, who gets impacted by it, right? Because you can't just throw it out. If we get rid of it, who gets impacted? What does that impact look like?
Let's bring it back to opera for a second. Let's bring it back to the art form itself for a second, okay? If we really think about opera, there was always a composer who came along and somebody was going, what on earth is that? They would put out a work, and I mean, Carmen got flack when it was first put out.
Yeah, it wasn't until 3 months, right?
Tosca, somebody said it was 3 hours of noise, and all of a sudden, there's two biggest pieces of the repertoire.
Quick plug, because the Dallas Opera is going to do a video stream of Carmen, and it's one of my favorite performances. So October the 9th, if you are, and it'll be available. So make sure you watch it because it's gorgeous. It's brilliant. Okay, I'm back.
Listen, I don't want to plug myself, but I got to do the intro for that along with Ian Dara, our fabulous general director.
Yeah.
It's been a while since I'd been in a gown, y'all. That pandemic poundage ran up on me. I'm glad it fit. So anyway, we digress for a little bit. We get silly sometimes. Thank you, Amy. Thank you for your kind words, Amy. We appreciate it. We love educating. Yes, and we appreciate your appreciation.
Wow.
But she's the only one who's. Hey,
no,
don't look at me like I'm crazy.
Question. What was the question?
There was no question. She just said
you were going to ask.
Oh, sorry. All right. I'm sorry. Back to Oprah. I love Oprah, y'all. I hope she doesn't sue me for saying that, but I do. I love Oprah. I like the opera. Anyway, so I think my final question, because we need to wrap up soon, because Instagram will kick you off if you go over an hour. But I do want to ask the question, Quo, because the current events, they're very real.
Yeah.
Current events are very real. And they do have a real effect, and we did an episode on self-care. We had Tina Robertson on here, giving us tips and tools on how to take care of ourselves during times like this. And I would say that it has, it's escalated more and more, since then. And so I want to make sure that people understand the importance of taking care of ourselves right now. So, and I want to distinguish what that looks like in this work, because a lot of people think that ignoring very real issues that are affecting groups of people, because it makes them uncomfortable, is in the realm of self-care. What's the difference?
I would say the difference is centering immediate comfort over centering growth and centering something that is going to provide healthy benefits in the long run. To Tina's point, she was saying how, if that's how you're feeling, then you feel that way that day and you take care of yourself. But you got to get through the day. So you don't get to just shut down everything in a way because you just don't want to deal with it. So if it's not possible at the moment, what does it mean to come back to it? What does it mean to question truly and then discern whether or not I'm not doing this because I really just don't have it in me today and I shouldn't have to earn rest? So I'm just going to rest because I deserve it. Am I doing this because I want to rest, or am I doing this because I don't want to deal with that? Because it makes me uncomfortable, because it provides too much internal reflection without me feeling protected in the ways that I have been protected more than others. So there is a difference between ignoring things and having everybody go along just to get along, because it does not help. It does not work. No. And then there's a difference between constantly being bombarded with things that are unhealthy. So we want to be mindful of the difference. And then we want to be mindful of our own resilience. We want to be mindful of, again, center what matters. Self-care matters. Ensuring others can participate in self-care matters as well. So if it's just me, and me and mine and all about me, right? You still have to take care of yourself, because as you say, you can't pour from an empty vessel. But what does it mean to continuously restore your vessel, knowing that the restoring of your vessel pulls from somebody else's empty vessel?
What
does it
One
mean?
more time. Once more for the folks in back.
So we want to be mindful of what it means as all these things are happening, and how we push our expectations, our guilt, our doubt, our frustrations onto others so that we can walk off and be okay. But then look at those who are having to take those on in addition to already facing whatever they're facing. So we want to be mindful that, yes, we want to take care of ourselves. We want to restore and refill our vessel. Our vessel is not more important than someone else's vessel, especially if we are the cause of the emptying of someone else's vessel. So we want to be mindful of that. You want to share, share. It's okay. You deserve it. They deserve it.
You, Quo.
We all deserve it. You deserve it. They deserve it. And then as we move this work forward and as we gather around the table, take joy in the gathering part. I guess I just moved into positive notes. Is that what I did?
Yeah, well, I was just about to say we're going to go to positive notes anyway, because
moving into positive notes.
Oh, wait, did you see what Lisa said? Off of others' vessels.
Lisa's on staff. She's awesome.
Amen. Hallelujah. Yes.
And so it's the gathering portion that we want to pay attention to. Yes, the table are the tools. They represent the tools that we need in order to do our work. The power, the resources, the ability to make decisions, the ability to contribute. It's the inclusion. It's the different creativity that takes place at the table. So that's the table. But what we want to look at is the gathering portion. We are in this together. We are willingly coming to this space together so that we can look at what is on this table, so that we can partake in what is on this table, so that we can feast, so that we can have a meal, so that we can share in music, so that we can share in circle, in community. But we have to have some real conversations about fear. We have to have some real conversations about when we feel like we are not being acknowledged, because it's important that we share that and be honest about it. It's important that we're honest that, I feel that I'm not being considered in this. So let's have a conversation, talk about why, and then talk about what is necessary for someone to feel like they're being included, and then whether or not that feeling is entitlement or if that feeling is truly a fear that they are not being included. Because not everyone is entitled to everything.
No,
So, especially in equity work, right? Equity and equality are not the same things.
no, they are
So,
not.
equity
We
is what
tried
we need,
equality.
right?
We tried it. It
Well,
didn't work.
we never truly tried. Well, yeah, we did try equality, but we have this perception of equality, but it takes equity to get there.
Come on, that's
So
it.
as we move toward equality and a point where we can get to the things, well, things are, it's equal, and what you do with what you got is what you do with what you got. Equity acknowledges that we did not get the same things to do the same things.
Yeah.
So it's necessary. So my positive notes are be bold, as you say, but go together. Do it with others. Gather at the table. Have honest conversations. You deserve for your humanity to be acknowledged, no matter who you are. You deserve it. Others deserve it as well. So as you seek for your humanity to be acknowledged, acknowledge the humanity of others, and then be honest, be gracious with yourself, be gracious with others, and then be mindful of what conversations need to be had around the table. And then how do we get to feasting together at the table? What does it look like to extend that table? Because again, there are enough resources to go around. We have to be mindful of where they are, who's hoarding resources,
That's it.
who has yet to be able to actually join in this gathering to partake in the resources. How do we get them there? Knowing that that means you get less resources, but you get what you need. And that's the real conversation that has to be had.
That's the real, and that's the real talk.
And if it is equity and you have been receiving more resources than everyone, and you look up and you don't see any action, but others are starting to receive resources that they have not received, that's the action happening. That's the action. It's happening. And so we have to kind of shift how we acknowledge, again, how we acknowledge progress, and then be mindful that as we do this work, we do it together, right? You're not alone. As we do this work, it's going to take more energy than you thought, but it's worth it. It's contagious. It makes for a better everything. So those are my positive notes.
Well, I always end, well, I try to always end with be bold, folks. This is going to take being bold. It's going to take being brave. It's going to take grace, grace that we need to give to ourselves so that we may pour it out on others.
And accountability.
And accountability. Most definitely accountability. We have responsibility, to ourselves, to each other, to continue in this. So thank you all for tuning in. We simply cannot do this without you. Opera is at a pause right now in the traditional sense, but it is definitely very much alive in the digital world and in a bit of a revolution right now, an evolution. And so it is an exciting time to be in the industry, albeit a tiny bit scary. But I think a little fear is always good. Keeps you on your toes. But I would encourage you to be innovative, be creative. Never forget that we are artists. Everybody is an artist in some sort of way. Some of us just went and did it professionally. So thank you all. And thank you to Dallas Opera, of course. David, one more time.
Hey, David.
A friend. Thank you for Dallas Opera staff that had our back and supported us. Thank you for our counterparts at other companies. Like I said, we've gotten such great feedback from you, and we very much appreciate you. Stay strong out there, y'all. Stay safe, stay healthy, and all that jazz. Peace.
All right. Bye, everyone.